Continuum was first introduced with the Lumia 950 Duo, and most people quickly wrote it off as an interesting feature with pretty poor execution. However, Microsoft repeatedly made it clear that they think Continuum is the main differentiator of Windows 10 Mobile. So you might wonder what it's like now after the anniversary update. I'm Martin from Tech Altar, and let's find out. So the grand vision of Continuum is that your phone will be able to replace your PC and it will become this ultra mobile computer that you have with you at all times. And I really like that idea. I think this is where the future of mobile is. But when it launched, I had three key issues with it. It was slow and buggy, Windows Mobile barely had any apps that supported Continuum, and it needed a keyboard, a mouse, a dock, and a monitor to work well, which means it wasn't actually mobile. So, is that still the case? Well, Continuum now is both amazing and frustrating at the same time. Setting everything up using Microsoft's display dock is super easy and intuitive. Basically plug and play, or Miracast and play. You can use your phone as a trackpad and as a keyboard if you're just doing some casual movie watching, and all of my attached hardware works just as I expected it to. And the initial experience I got was pretty fantastic too. Everything worked well, and it really does feel like a desktop from the start with keyboard shortcuts and whatnot. And there's something infinitely cool about the fact that your phone is now actually your PC. Now, I was testing Continuum on a Lumia 950, which comes with last year's mid-range Snapdragon 808 chip, as well as 3 gigs of RAM, so it's certainly no powerhouse, but I expected things to work well enough. And while performance isn't mind-blowing, it's certainly fast enough for casual productivity like editing a Word document or sending emails. You can also stream full HD video to your TV without much trouble, which is a pretty slick way of watching movies, by the way. Trouble does come though when you try to push things to the limits, especially with multitasking. You can theoretically use 2 apps simultaneously, one on your phone and one on the display, but when I did anything heavier than messaging, my 950 started to stutter pretty badly. Also, when multitasking on the desktop side, some apps like Groove Music, my podcast and YouTube apps for example, seem to run just fine in the background, but others like Edge would just stop playing stuff when I switched apps or even tabs within Edge. So this is no multitasking gem to say the least. But okay, I could accept not having multitasking, I mean it's a phone after all, but the real problem comes from overheating. For some reason, your phone's display has to stay on to power the external display, which means that at any time, your phone has to power its own display, the secondary one, and run 2 apps at once while getting charged. You could probably fry some eggs on that poor Lumia after this, especially because Snapdragon 808s are known to overheat even without Continuum. Now, to be fair, this seems to be a hardware limitation, while Continuum as a platform seems to be working well enough on itself. And there will be phones in the future which will have more powerful hardware, but I'd say that on the Lumia 950 line at least, you'll be stuck with light productivity and maybe movie watching while keeping the phone's display as dim as possible. But Martin, what about apps? This is what usually keeps Windows 10 Mobile down, isn't it? And yes, I agree, but somehow in this case, I'm actually surprised to say that it was the least of my concerns. First, you have native apps, and nearly every so-called universal Windows app can run in Continuum mode. The good news is that the number of universal apps has actually increased dramatically in this year because of PCs running Windows 10, and I'd expect the trend to continue even more now that the Xbox One can start using those apps too. Of course, Microsoft's own apps work pretty well, like Office, Email, Calendar, a beautiful new Skype app, Groove for music playback, and a lot more, so your system basics are covered. And quite a few third-party apps have also made the jump, like Twitter, as well as my own favorite messaging app Viber, and even my podcast app, and a few games are here too, and they actually all work like they do on my PC. It's really cool when they work, and kind of funny when they don't. Now, of course, there are still lots of apps missing, but I find that already most things I need for casual productivity and entertainment are here. And for the stuff that is missing, you have the browser. While that is a pretty bad solution on mobile, most people on desktop use most services in their browser anyway, and this doesn't really feel all that different. Want Google services using Continuum, for example? No problem, just open them in Edge. You can actually see Continuum as a Windows Chromebook solution, an Edgebook if you will. But really, this made me realize that Microsoft is sort of skipping the app gap on its phones by simply giving you a decent desktop-like browser. There are a few areas that clearly would need more native apps, like gaming for example, but maybe the recent addition of Xbox One will help here too. And HP and Microsoft are even working on getting classic desktop programs streamed to your Continuum phone from a server, so you could remotely access programs like, say, Visual Studio within Continuum. Now that, as far as I know, is limited to enterprise users with really good internet connections. But if you add everything together, there is a way to get desktop apps on Continuum. There's a way to get quite a few pretty high quality universal Windows apps that are native for Continuum. And there's a way to get web services in a pretty decent desktop-like browser. It is quite a Frankenstein solution, but I think it's okay. And if you're happy with especially a Chromebook, for example, then this one will do at least as much for you. What I think Microsoft is struggling with the most is figuring out how to add peripherals like mice and keyboards to your phone to make Continuum work really well. But here too there have been some improvements. For example, we now have 3 ways to connect instead of just 1. First, you have the original option to use Continuum on any random dumb screen like a spare monitor, just like before. Second, you get specific Continuum accessories like HP's lap dock, for example. That's just all the peripherals bundled together into a cheap, portable, laptop-like package. And third, you can now, with the anniversary update, also cast your phone over to any Miracast-compatible Windows 10 PC and run Continuum as an app on that PC. So it's Windows 10 inside Windows 10. I call it Winception. Joke aside, this one usually confuses the hell out of people, but the idea here is that you can take your phone that has all of your personal files, all of your apps downloaded with all your accounts logged in, and connect that to any modern PC and make it yours in a secure way, knowing that none of your sensitive files or account info ever gets stored on that PC. At least technically that is pretty fascinating, and you now suddenly have millions of devices that could become a client for your Continuum enabled phone. Too bad the performance using this wireless method is noticeably worse than it is over a wired dock. But I can't stop thinking that somehow none of those 3 solutions are really ideal. You probably don't have random peripherals lying around everywhere you go for solution number 1. You probably don't want to buy extra hardware for solution number 2 yet, especially when it's not really any cheaper than just buying a cheap phone and a cheap laptop. And you probably don't want to rely on someone else's hardware to get all of your work done for number 3. But okay, 3 solutions are more than 1. And I guess some users, especially enterprise, I could imagine, have a lot of peripherals already, so they could use those, or they might find that for them, buying something like HP solution would actually cut costs. So I guess it's not all bad. But when I put everything together, I think Continuum sums up Windows 10 Mobile perfectly. It has real potential and it feels amazingly futuristic when it works, but it is far away from being a final product yet. Surprisingly, for once, apps don't really seem to be the main issue, but rather the fact that for now it's more complex and more limited than simply buying a cheap phone and a cheap laptop. But things are improving quickly, and Microsoft seems hell-bent on making Continuum a thing. So I suppose with more development and better hardware, Continuum might eventually become a thing. I'll be sure to review it again if there's a big update or something interesting to talk about. And so if you're interested in Continuum, make sure to subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'm also on social media, so make sure you follow me there as well, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.